I'd never posted anything like this before, but after years of carrying it around, I think I need to get it out somewhere. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's age. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending that some of the biggest moments of my life never happened. My name is William. At least, that's the name I'll use here. The crime I'm about to talk about happened more than a decade ago. Nobody was hurt, which is probably the only reason I can sleep at night. Still, it changed the course of my life in ways I didn't understand at the time. There's a saying that stuck with me long after everything was over. A false alarm is an alarm that distracts attention from the main thing. Back then, I thought it was clever. I thought it was a strategy. Now I think it was a warning. At the time, I was working a dead-end maintenance job at a large commercial complex. The pay was terrible, my debts were growing, and every month felt like a slow collapse. I spent my days fixing things that belonged to people who earned more money in a week than I saw in months. What made things worse was that I knew the building better than almost anyone. I knew which doors jammed during humid weather. I knew which security cameras were old and unreliable. I knew the routines of the guards, the cleaning crews, even the managers. Knowledge can be dangerous when desperation starts looking for opportunities. The idea didn't appear all at once. It grew slowly. First, it was just curiosity. Then it became a fantasy. Eventually, it became a plan. What I wanted was locked inside a records office on the 3rd floor. It wasn't cash, and it wasn't jewelry. In some ways, it was more valuable than either of those things. The problem was getting to it without anyone paying attention. That's when the concept of a false alarm entered my life. And once I started thinking about it, I couldn't stop. Looking back, I realized the hardest part wasn't figuring out how to do it. It was convincing myself that crossing the line was somehow reasonable. I kept telling myself I wasn't a violent person, that I wasn't planning to hurt anyone. I repeated that excuse so many times it almost sounded true. For weeks I paid closer attention to the building than I ever had as an employee. I noticed little patterns that everyone else ignored. When certain hallways were crowded, when offices emptied out, and how people reacted whenever something unexpected interrupted their routine. It amazed me how quickly normal behavior disappeared once people believed there was an emergency. That observation became the center of my thinking. If everyone's attention was pulled in one direction, perhaps nobody would notice something happening somewhere else. The strange thing about planning a crime is that your mind starts helping you build excuses. At least, mine did. I wasn't thinking, I'm becoming a criminal. I was thinking, I'm fixing a problem. That's how I justified it. I convinced myself that the company could afford the loss. I convinced myself that nobody would suffer. I even convinced myself that I was smarter than the people I was trying to deceive. That was probably the most dangerous part. Not the plan itself, but the confidence growing around it. I started preparing small details and rehearsing possible situations in my head. Every time I imagined something going wrong, I found a way to explain it away. Every warning sign became something I could ignore. The people around me had no idea what was happening inside my head. I would joke with coworkers, help someone carry equipment, and act completely normal while secretly thinking about the night everything would change. I remember realizing that I had crossed an invisible line. The crime hadn't happened yet, but in my mind, I had already chosen it the night before everything happened. I barely slept. I kept telling myself that I was calm, that I had thought through every possibility, but my body didn't believe me. Every small noise in my apartment made me look toward the door. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the notes I had made over the previous weeks. They looked different somehow. Before, they felt like preparation. That night, they looked like evidence. Still, I didn't stop. That was the part one struggled to explain. I had plenty of chances to walk away. Nobody was forcing me. There was no one threatening me. It was my own decision, and I kept moving forward because admitting I was wrong would mean admitting I had wasted all that time building the plan. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had changed. I talked to people, answered questions, and even laughed at a joke someone made. Inside, though, I felt like I was carrying a secret too heavy to hide. The day finally came, and the strangest part was how ordinary it felt. There was no dramatic moment where I suddenly became someone else. I still drank my coffee, checked my phone, and complained about small things like everyone around me. That normal feeling almost made it worse. As the hours passed, I became more focused. I noticed every movement around me, every person walking through the building, every conversation happening nearby. My nerves were hidden behind a mask of routine. When the moment approached, my heart started racing. All the confidence I had built while planning disappeared, replaced by doubt. I wondered if someone would notice something unusual, if I had missed some detail, or if this was the moment everything would fall apart. I remember taking a breath and telling myself to stay calm. That was the point where there was no longer a plan on paper. It was happening. And for the first time, I truly understood that I couldn't simply erase the decision I had made. The moment I had spent so much time imagining finally arrived, and it felt completely different from how I expected. In my head, everything had been controlled and predictable. In reality, the smallest things felt enormous. When the distraction began, the building changed instantly. People who had been focused on their own routines suddenly became alert and confused. Conversations stopped. Doors opened. Employees looked around, trying to understand what was happening. I watched from a distance, pretending to be just another person reacting to the situation. That was the strangest part, acting surprised while knowing exactly why everyone was moving. For a few seconds, I felt something close to excitement. The adrenaline was overwhelming. I understood why people describe dangerous moments as addictive. My heart was pounding, and my mind was moving faster than it ever had. But underneath that feeling was something else. A voice in my head kept asking the same question: what happens when this stops being a plan and becomes a memory you have to live with? For a few minutes, I thought everything was going exactly as I had imagined. The confusion around me created the opening I had hoped for, and everyone's attention seemed to be focused somewhere else. But reality has a way of ruining perfect plans. I noticed small things I hadn't considered. People were asking questions I didn't expect. Employees who normally ignored each other were suddenly communicating. The security staff were more organized than I had assumed, and every extra person in the area felt like another possible witness. I tried to stay calm and look natural, but inside I was fighting panic. The strange thing was that nobody was looking at me the way I feared. Most people were just worried and confused. They weren't searching for a villain. They were searching for answers. That realization stayed with me. I had imagined the moment of being caught so many times that I forgot something important. People aren't characters in your plan. They have their own reactions, their own fears, and their own lives. The biggest mistake I made was believing that preparation meant control. I had spent so much time thinking about my own actions that I forgot how unpredictable other people could be. During the confusion, something happened that I hadn't planned for. One of the employees decided to help organize everyone instead of simply following instructions. He started checking details, asking questions, and paying attention to things most people ignored. I remember watching him and feeling my confidence disappear. Suddenly, the whole situation felt much bigger than me. It wasn't just a clever trick anymore. It was a real event affecting real people. I saw the stress on their faces and realized my actions had created fear, even if that was never my intention. For the first time that night, I felt ashamed. I had spent weeks thinking about whether I could succeed. I hadn't spent enough time thinking about what kind of person I would become if I did. After the unexpected complications, my only goal was to remain calm. The confidence I had before was gone. Every sound made me nervous, every conversation nearby felt like it might be about me. I kept reminding myself to act normal. That was harder than I ever imagined. When you know you have done something wrong, even ordinary attention starts to feel threatening. A coworker walked past and casually asked if I knew what was happening. For a second, I froze. I had prepared for questions, but not for the reality of answering someone who trusted me. I gave a simple response and tried to move on. The worst part was realizing how easy it was to lie. That scared me more than anything else. I had always thought dishonest people were different from me, but there I was, looking someone in the eye and hiding the truth. The adrenaline was fading, and guilt was taking its place. The excitement was gone. What remained was the weight of what I had started. When everything was finally over, I expected to feel relieved. I thought I would walk away feeling proud that my plan had worked and that I had proven something to myself. Instead, I felt empty. The building slowly returned to normal. People went back to their tasks, conversations restarted, and the emergency became just another strange event people would talk about for a few days. But for me, it didn't disappear. I carried every detail with me. I noticed how tired some people looked. I remembered the worried expressions, the confusion, and the way everyone had reacted without knowing they were part of my decision. Those images stayed in my head. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying everything, searching for the exact moment when I could have stopped. I thought about all the choices leading up to it and wondered why I had convinced myself that success mattered more than the consequences. I had wanted control. Instead, I had created a memory I couldn't escape. The days after the incident were the hardest because nothing happened. That might sound strange, but I was prepared for consequences. I was prepared for someone to knock on my door, for questions, for everything to fall apart. Instead, life continued normally. And that silence became its own punishment. Every time my phone rang, my stomach tightened. Every time someone at work mentioned the event, I felt a wave of panic. I started noticing how often people casually talked about things they considered forgotten. But I hadn't forgotten. I carried this secret everywhere. I would sit with coworkers during lunch, listen to their stories, and think about how none of them knew the truth about me. That feeling changed the way I saw myself. Before, I thought getting away with something meant winning. I was wrong. Getting away with it meant being alone with your own thoughts. There was nobody to blame, nobody to argue with, and nobody who could understand the conflict happening inside my head. For the first time, I questioned whether the crime had actually given me anything at all. As the weeks passed, I started noticing changes in myself. They weren't obvious to other people, but I felt them. I became quieter. More suspicious. I started analyzing every conversation, every look, every small reaction from the people around me. The strange thing was that I had created this fear myself. Nobody had to chase me. Nobody had to threaten me. My own memory was enough. I began thinking about the person I was before all of this happened. I used to believe I was someone who worked hard, someone who tried to do the right thing even when life was unfair. Afterward, I wondered if that person had just been an illusion. The worst part wasn't the possibility of being caught. It was realizing I was capable of making a choice I never thought I would make. I had always imagined criminals as strangers, people completely different from me. But I learned that sometimes the difference is just one bad decision combined with enough excuses. And that realization stayed with me. Months passed, and the memory of that night became something I carried quietly. From the outside, everything looked fine. I kept working, paying bills, and living my life like nothing had changed. But inside, I was constantly returning to that moment. I started asking myself different questions. Not, how did I get away with it, or was I careful enough? Those questions belonged to the person I was before. The question that bothered me was simpler. Why did I become someone who could do this? I realized my biggest mistake happened long before the crime itself. It started when I began believing my problems gave me permission to ignore what was right. Everyone faces difficult moments. Everyone feels angry, trapped, or disappointed. But there is a dangerous point where explaining your actions becomes a way of avoiding responsibility. I had crossed that point. The false alarm distracted everyone else, but the biggest distraction was the one I created for myself. I used excuses to avoid seeing the truth about my own choices. Looking back now, the strange thing is that I didn't lose the things I expected to lose. I wasn't arrested. I didn't lose my job. Nobody publicly discovered what I had done. But I still paid a price. I lost the version of myself who believed he was better than this. I lost the ability to look at certain situations without remembering that night. Every time I heard about someone making a selfish choice, I thought about my own. The crime gave me a short moment of control, but it took away years of peace. I also realized something about fear. Before, I was afraid of being caught. Later, I became afraid of what I might be capable of if I ever allowed myself to justify another wrong decision. That scared me more. I often wonder what would have happened if someone had stopped me before I acted. Maybe I would have been angry at them. Maybe I would have called them an obstacle. Now I think they would have been saving me from myself. I'm writing this now because I finally understand something I didn't back then. The biggest danger wasn't the plan. It wasn't the risk of getting caught. It was the way I slowly convinced myself that my actions were acceptable. That is how people cross lines. Not all at once. Not with some dramatic moment where they suddenly become someone else. Sometimes it happens through small decisions, small excuses, and small compromises until one day you look back and realize you were standing somewhere you never thought you would be. I don't share this story because I'm proud of what happened. I share it because I hope someone reading this recognizes that dangerous moment before it goes too far. If you're angry, desperate, or convinced that the world owes you something, be careful. Those feelings can make terrible choices look reasonable. The false alarm distracted everyone around me, but the biggest deception was the one I created inside my own mind. I got what I wanted that night. And I spent years learning that it wasn't worth the cost.